Well, thank you so much. It's very humbling to be part of this spectacular panel, and thanks everyone for sticking around to the last talk of the day. And so we started with beer and then whiskey and milk, but my secret weapon is tea. So I spend lots of time drinking cups of rooibos tea. And I'm just honored to share this story. It's an incredibly complex case study that's a synthesis of nearly 15 years worth of work that is ongoing and constantly evolving, and I'm just learning so much. Okay, so take a step back. Conflicts between predators and people occur for a variety of fundamental reasons. Biologically, carnivores require a protein-rich diet and have large home ranges. And this inevitably draws them into recurrent competition with humans who have similar needs. The domestication of livestock further precipitated this clash, because people were now raising ungulates, and many carnivores are specialized for ungulate predation. Thus, some individuals may easily shift to domestic stock when opportunities arise or when native ungulates become scarce. And we see analogous conflicts around the world where people and predators coexist. Unfortunately, people often retaliate to these losses by persecuting predators. And the root of most predator management policies around the globe stem from predator eradication campaigns. And history and patterns tend to repeat. Now, this persecution is justified globally because predators predate on livestock and people depend on livestock. And the talks today have done such a beautiful job of illustrating this. And most research focuses on the dispute level of these conflicts and mitigating proximate issues. And while this is vital, it only scratches the surface, because livestock losses alone virtually never fully explain the problem. And we need to address the deep-rooted and ultimate reasons for conflict if we are to truly reconcile these complex issues. So Namibia offers a great place to examine this question. It was the first country in the world to incorporate conservation of biodiversity into its constitution. And it's famous for its protected areas. It also boasts an incredible assemblage of large predators. And these predators used to be found throughout Namibia, but now are primarily concentrated in conservancies and protected areas. So conservation efforts have been largely unsuccessful in a majority of the country that is in private ownership, primarily for livestock production. It's shown here in the tan color. And so you can see it's a huge part of the country. And in these areas where dominant predators have been removed, it makes way for a new apex predator, the caracal. So we focus our research on the considerable portion of this country in private ownership, and this is primarily used for commercial livestock production, which is different than subsistence livestock production. And so you can see kind of everywhere that was in tan. And so we all know that working with wildlife is particularly complex when we're working in these human-utilized landscapes. And so we needed farmer permission and cooperation. So my approach was to identify the most outspoken caracal opponents. And I've been told that this demonstrates I'm a glutton for punishment. But most importantly, through trial and error, and I think this is really important, we need to admit and embrace the error that we've all done and learn from each other so we don't make the same mistakes. I used a variety of different methods that eventually led to trust building that has been key in all of the talks. And this opened doors for me. And once I had trust, I had farmers vouch for me. And this was really important because this is a group, these are mostly Afrikaans farmers or from Afrikaans descent, and they're notoriously very difficult to work with. And so I began by simply asking farmers to inform me about damages, allow me to forensically investigate livestock suspected of depredation, such as this ewe, and determine how they died. And so we were able to determine this lamb was stillborn. Nothing to do with predators. We found very few livestock were actually killed by caracals or other carnivores, and the greatest predator to livestock was actually domestic dogs. Yet it was firmly known that these farmers were killing a lot of wild predators. So without judgment, we asked them to also let us know when they killed predators, not to change their behaviors. And this provided a wealth of information, diet, genetics, to name a few, and we've necropsied, way over 1,000 individuals to gather this information. And it took a while to gain momentum, but as Jane so eloquently spoke about and all of the presenters today, once you have that trust, momentum and buy-in to your conservation projects just naturally comes. And so eventually participation grew exponentially. And then something transformative started happening without asking. I never once asked the farmers, but they started notifying me when they captured predators before they killed them. And so now instead of killing them, we were able to go and assess them, assess the specific situations, injuries, losses, and most importantly, to attach radio collars. And this was my primary objective. I was like Amy, went over there originally to work on cats, not away from people. However, I did not attach the radio collars. I had the farmers do this, and this was key because it transformed ownership of the issue. This is the head of the Namibian Farming Association here on the left, attaching a radio collar to a cat on his property. This is significant. He had previously killed over 40 caracals on his farm the year before. And they would release these cats back onto their own farm. We never once relocated a single cat. So if they didn't get permission, then the fate of these cats was sealed, but they would grant us permission. And they would do it themselves. And so this was substantial because these are cats that were trapped by the farmers with the 100% the intention of being killed. And now they're radio collared and being released. And so we'd monitor their movements. And I assumed, completely wrong, but I assumed that caracals were being killed because they take sheep, right? That's what farmers assume. That's what I was being told. So I needed to know how many sheep they're eating. And so I used 3 methods and examined over 1,100 samples, stomach contents, kill sites, and scat, to answer this question. And they each have distinctive bias. So holistically, they allow us to understand caracal dietary requirements. And I found that most caracals never took livestock. Domestic stock comprised about 2.1% of their diet, despite their abundance throughout the study area. However, this varied tremendously based on the region, and in some regions was significantly higher. And what's important is I would never ever go to a farmer and say, caracal don't kill livestock. They would laugh in my face because some caracal do. This is important information for us to have, but I would have door slammed in my face if I were just to project this and say, okay, they don't kill livestock and you should coexist with them. And so it's kind of background information at this point. But they were actively selecting against livestock, and despite the fact that livestock was the most abundant ungulate in the system, by far. And so even though they're actively selecting against livestock, and I still had 100% mortality of all radio-collared cats. 100%. I had 40 cats all die. And this was really depressing. I had not one farmer that I worked with kill a cat. But eventually these cats had tremendous ranges. Some of them would travel 200 kilometers. Eventually they would encounter someone that would kill them. And, okay. And so this was really problematic because this is where a lot of projects end. However, I felt I was missing half the puzzle, and I couldn't see the entire picture. So I made the grueling decision to go back and be trained as a social scientist, so I could understand why they were being persecuted. And for this, I had to get my hands dirty and understand farming practices. And growing up on a ranch was my secret weapon in this success. And so I had to understand small stock farmers. And so these areas are so arid that they raise small stock and not cattle, primarily sheep and goats. And so I used qualitative interviews. And I had really interesting results. So they're killing a tremendous amount of cats, yet many of them, if you peel back these layers like onions, didn't want them to go extinct. There was a tremendous distrust of NGOs, and they felt like NGOs didn't understand them. And the greatest threat that they faced was drought. But they spent a disproportionate amount of time and money on predator removal. And I believe that a lot of this was fear motivated, and this has similarities in other places. And they told very interesting stories. And to summarize, essentially what they said is the conflict centers around livestock breeds. And this theme emerged over and over and over again. And so it's necessary to understand breeds. And so most conservationists shy away from animal science, right? It's nowhere in human wildlife conflict is there the word livestock. And they think a sheep is a sheep. But I'm going to give you sheep 101 because not all sheep are created equal. And so this is the Karakul sheep. It's a localized variety that was brought to Namibia nearly 120 years ago. It's arid adapted. It's a multi-purpose sheep. And so it's kept, you can utilize the meat, but it has a smaller frame. So it's not as desirable on international market because it has like smaller chops. People want a large lamb chop. But it's also double coated. And so you can use the hair to make a variety of different items. However, their greatest global value comes from the coat of these neonatal lambs. They have this unique crinkle pattern that's highly desirable to the fashion industry, and they often end up in the runways of the haute couture market in Europe. Now, these sheep are heavily managed for protection, and this stems from the fact that they're flocking sheep. There's safety in numbers. And so you can use a variety of different mitigation strategies. They're corralled, and you can use livestock guard dogs very successfully. And this is what it looks like on practice. However, if we look at another sheep, the Dorpa sheep, this is a recently introduced sheep, less locally adapted, a mutton sheep. And they originated in South Africa. They're selected for this large carcass that is very desirable on the international market. And there's a lot more fat marbling, which South Africans and Europeans and Americans tend to select for. They're managed completely differently, and this stems from the fact that these sheep need a lot more elbow room. And so they don't flock. So you have small herds that are out to pasture, and you harvest these lambs at about 3 to 6 months. So on the landscape, you have these pockets of sheep all over the place, controlled with fences, often these jackal-proof fences created in livestock camps, and they're left alone on the landscape. And this is a barrier not only for sheep, but for all other wildlife. And so what? Why do you care about sheep? This doesn't matter. Well, to holistically understand this conflict, we need to take a step back. And so Karakul sheep farming was the predominant commercial breed for a long time. And then it crashed. And then it was replaced by Dorpa sheep farming. And so what happened? Well, this was the rise of the animal rights campaign, particularly the anti-fur movement. And this was necessary because of a craze for spotted coats that promoted the slaughter of millions of spotted cats. And this movement escalated. And it implemented strategies of shaming for individuals and for companies that spread rapidly across the US and Europe. And it was hugely successful in decreasing fur demands. But there was this backlash that we couldn't have predicted. And so it wasn't until I merged the ecological data with animal science data and the social science data, and then took a step back and looked at this within a geopolitical lens, that I truly began to understand the forces at work here. And so I'm just going to very simply present this visual model. So the anti-fur movement led to this international public pressure that decreased public demand, decreased the pelt fur crash. So this switch to mutton sheep These are breeds that don't flock, so there's a change in management strategies. With lower worker intensity, so there's fewer workers now. These mutton sheep require anywhere from 1/10 to 1/100th of the amount of workers. Because there's fewer workers, sick individuals are less likely to receive treatment. There's more disease, which decrease health, higher livestock death, more predators being killed. Predators learn to take livestock from scavenging, and this all feeds back into lower tolerance for predators. Fewer workers, you can employ fewer non-lethal predator mitigation strategies because those are labor intensive. And so this feeds back into lower tolerance for predators. Higher unemployment there's higher stock theft. Predators are blamed. More fences because there aren't shepherds leads to higher concentrations of overgrazing. Livestock are in poorer condition, more death, more predators that are killing livestock. This feeds back into when they die, because being in poor condition, their predators are usually blamed, so there's less tolerance. Overgrazing, there's less forage available for wild ungulates, so you have less prey on the landscape as well. And less native prey for predators, they're more likely to kill livestock. And so this just feeds back and in a variety of different ways. The ewes are nutritionally taxed from lactation, and so there's just more lambs. Lambs are more vulnerable, and so this all feeds back into essentially farmers operating at the margin, so they're not willing to take any risks. And so this leads to predator removal. And this has changed the landscape for Namibian predators, where the dominant farming method came with approach of completely eradicating all predators on a massive scale. The first year alone to this switch, 3,000 Namibian farmers reported killing caracals. And with my interviews, all mutton farmers reported killing caracals within the past year. So I think the farmers tell this story the best. This is a Dorpa sheep farmer. The best way to stop the problem of predators is to remove them all after 3 or 4 days of night shooting and trapping during the day. You can get most of them. The others get the message and go away. If you have good fences, you can keep them away for a few weeks, but then you must start the cycle again. It's a never-ending war with predators. There's very few options right here for coexistence. And so we need to kind of reframe how we're thinking about this. So there are benefits. Karakul sheep have less of an environmental impact. You can adaptively manage the herd in terms of drought. Years of drought, if it's a drought year, you can harvest every single lamb. You can't do that with other strategies. And you can keep mixed flocks and use guard animals. So the ethics can be debated, but the benefits ecologically are strong, and from a carnivore perspective. And so you can use strategies like keeping lambs in these kind of predator jails, predator-proof jails, so that they're safe, and use guard dogs. So you can either manage livestock to prevent losses, or you can remove predators to prevent losses. And these are two fundamentally different paradigms that are dictated by the type of sheep that they're selecting for. And there are dozens of other species and hundreds of individuals, hundreds of thousands of individuals that are caught in the crossfire of this war against these predators, including sometimes the sheep themselves. And this is really problematic on a landscape level, because this is a tapestry. All these black lines represent farms. And so you can imagine if all of them were fenced and electric fenced at that, the problems that would have for less mobile species. And so just kind of as a parting thought, as conservationists, we tend to get tunnel vision and assume we know what's happening. So if we came into the scenario and had this sheep that was dead, we can add fuel to the fire by going in there and telling this farmer, well, you should get a livestock guard dog. Why wouldn't that work in this scenario? Well, because this is a sheep, the breed that could never benefit from using a livestock guard dog. They're highly successful in certain scenarios, but not in all. And so when we come in with this savior mentality, kind of preach these Band-Aid solutions, we add fuel to the fire, and we can make these problems infinitely worse. And so well-intentioned citizens can have these ripple effects, and these impact livelihoods in other parts of the world. And we need a transdisciplinary approach because these conflicts are so complex. So we're working on trying to label this pelt as predator-friendly fur. And so they've created a brand just for the Namibian Swakara sheep, and seems like that's hopefully going to be the future of encouraging sustainable practices with predators into the future. And they're actually writing into the recommendations of this of these pelts that are sold on a global market that they have to be farmed in ways that are sustainable with predators. So just want to kind of thank my team, my supporters, and with that I'll say bye adanki, or thank you very much. Thank you very much. Okay.
We've got time for a couple of questions, if anybody has any questions for Aletris. Yes, right at the back.
Hi, thank you for a nice presentation. Is there any cultural or social importance of caracals in those areas? For example, in some areas of Pakistan, they were usually trained to hunt small game. So is there any such importance of caracals in those areas?
So, there has been. So they did originally come from Pakistan, and so they've selected for slightly different pelt patterns. And so I guess the experts can tell if a pelt is from Pakistan or from Namibia. But there has become these cultural a lot of farmers culturally identify with these Swakara or Karakul sheep now. And so it is very important to them. And it's very difficult for them to switch. However, when they all, during these crashes and then these pelts essentially were useless, they're all afraid that could happen again. And so there's kind of this, uncertainty of putting all of your eggs in this basket that is so dependent on kind of the whims of the Western world. And so that is scary too. And so you can see kind of those debates going on in their head. Yeah. Yes.
Thank you. You said that you got the trust of the farmers, mm-hmm. and that you found this evidence that the caracals were not really killing their livestock. Mm-hmm. But you didn't tell them that. Oh, I do. I tell them that, but I don't ever use that approach. I would never use that as my introduction to them. Okay. Yeah. But do you think they're going to take that on board at any stage? Because they seem to be killing the caracals continually. They are. But what works better is I don't tell them that. The farmers themselves tell them that. And so the cats that were radio collared, we would go to the kill sites together. And so they experienced that these cats were not taking livestock. We'd go to the kill site, they would see that it killed a steenbok, and that was much more important than going in there and trying to preach the scientific data and say, well, actually only 2%, and okay, but if those 2% is their sheep, then that's very significant to them. And so what I'm trying to get at is, why are they killing caracals still? So many. So a huge part of it is because now a majority of the region are Dorpa farmers. And so you have a Karakul farmer that is coexisting with Karakul cats, and but their neighbor is a Dorpa farmer. And because the Dorpa sheep are out on these camps everywhere, the Dorpa mentality is that there are no protection strategies. There are no guard dogs. There are no shepherds. There's none of these strategies, these mitigation methods work. So their method is to eradicate all predators, period. But so are the caracals killing the Dorpers? They're primarily killing Dorpa, yeah. So they are killing them higher than 2%? No, but almost in fact, all of that 2% was Dorpa sheep. None of them were Karakul sheep. So what percent of Dorpers are they killing? What percent of 2% of their diet. I don't know what percent of the Dorpa sheep.
of like the number of like the percentage of Dorpa sheep in the country that are being killed by caracal. I couldn't tell you that. In regions where it's entirely Dorpa sheep, the number is higher, and it's about 8 to 9%. In areas where it's entirely Dorpa sheep. So, yeah.
Yeah, there's one at the back, and then Graham, and then we will close because it's reception time, or will be in.
Thank you very much. I just wanted to make a comment or stroke question. Do you not think that maybe the response to killing these cats might be related to the perceived threat, not the experienced threat? Because I think that's important when it comes to these predators.
Yeah. I 100% agree. Yeah. So the perception is that these cats kill a lot of sheep. And perception is a really difficult aspect to change. And that's why, me saying, okay, and presenting these data, I don't think that's changed anything. But exactly the same experience as Jane, when the farmers get up at these agricultural associations and they say, actually, my cat, and they name their cat, and these cats, they're often named after their wives. But my cat, Annabelle, is eating nothing but Steenbok and has behaved very well and didn't go towards one of my lambs. That is quite effective, and that's changing perceptions. I don't feel like I myself am changing the perceptions. I feel like the farmers are changing perceptions. What is helping is now, working with these caracal farmers, working with the farmers that are doing things right, that are using these methods, that are working really hard to coexist with predators, and then help them to get a premium by marketing these pelts as, predator-friendly fur, so that they can get a premium, so that now they're willing to accept, these people, they coexist with leopards and caracal and jackal and animals that you wouldn't think you could necessarily have lambs on a landscape with. And so I think that's what's beneficial is, having that kind of monetary aspect as well.
Graham?
Yeah, Aletris, thanks very much for the talk. Yeah, I was just wondering, have you compared the value between the Karakul lamb pelts and as opposed to like Dorper from mutton for?
Yeah, that's a very great question.
Is there any potential in raising awareness to the Dorper farmers of the potential if they could move across to Karakul sheep?
That's a fantastic question. And I'm hoping that's kind of the next stage of this, is to look at the economics and to model this. And maybe there's someone brilliant in this room who'd like to collaborate on that. So an individual pelt can be highly valuable. Single Swakara pelts that have kind of the right pattern and the right color can sell for $100 to $200 for one lamb. So, the cost per lamb is much higher than just a mutton sheep. And not only that, but you can also use the carcass. It's a much smaller carcass, so you can still eat the meat and have the pelt. You can even harvest stillborn lambs. You can still use that pelt. So there's a tremendous amount. So economically, it's much more beneficial. However, it's this risk. Right? It's this risk of this Western market crash that terrifies them. And that's why so many of them are reluctant to transition back to caracal sheep. And so it's trying to build that market, make it robust enough that they feel comfortable investing their entire family's future. And on some of these farms, on these caracal farms, they have 100 people that are reliant on their income. On a single farm in caracal farming. And so, trying to create those strategies so that they can trust those 100 people's, ability to eat on, what people are going to do in the United States and in Europe, and kind of what their thoughts and what they might want. So, and that's a tremendous risk. And so I think that's the level of uncertainty that we're trying to incorporate. And I think if we can get this predator-friendly fur established, then it would help to give them more of that certainty. So that's what we're working on now. But excellent question.
Great,
Thank you.
many thanks.